I remember having my very first conversation with God in front of other people at the age of 4. There I was, this little dapper 4-year-old. And when the officers asked, who wants to lead the prayer? I jumped at the chance and raised my hand, ready to show my contemporaries I knew how to pray. So I waited for everyone to close their eyes before beginning my conversation with God. And then I prayed the only prayer that I knew at that point in my life. Dear God, please bless the food that we're about to eat. The prayer ended, and then the officer who was overseeing that prayer, he took me aside. And he thanked me for my prayer. But then he further went on and told me that prayers, they're like talks with God, and that I should learn how to talk to God about anything and not just food. I heard what he said, but I ran off to play with my friends because, after all, I was 4, and I had the attention span of a 4-year-old. But I heard what he said. I understood what he said. I had to learn to have talks with God, to ask him for his blessings, to thank him, and to let him know what our needs are. From that point on, the conversations, they started to evolve. Well, at least bit by bit. My elementary school years had me thanking God for his blessings, help me with my tests, bless my family, help me not to get sick, and other blanketing requests. I mean, nothing too specific because there isn't too much that's going on in the life of a kindergarten through 5th grader, right? But I was moving on to what I thought was the big show, middle school and high school. Now, my prayers were still a little blanketing and very general, but there was now a little bit more depth added. Dear God, please let the pretty girl from 3rd period smile at me today. And the very, very often used one during that time, dear God, please don't make me look like a dork today. As you can see, there was a little bit more specifics involved with that prayer during that point in my life. Nothing too extensive because those things were just what was going on in my life at that point, which isn't too much when you're going through high school. I mean, I don't mean to burst the bubble of any high schoolers here, but life in high school, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Moving on to my college years and my first real-world job, I began to experience and see issues and situations that I had never really dealt with in my life. But I figured the conversations with God, they were just going to be a little bit more interesting, at least for him. Now, the topic of the one began to enter the conversation with God. And my only ask during this conversation regarding this topic was, dear God, please let the one help me to be closer to you. Now, my love story and how I ended up with the one is a speech and a show all by itself. But I can tell you that with regards to that topic, there were many, many, many conversations. I was an adult now with real-world conversations with God, and I spent a lot of the time asking God, please bless me with this, bless me with that, help me with this, help me with that. I was spending a lot of my conversations asking for things. However, I found and discovered the beauty of a prayer of gratitude, most notably when I married the one. A year and a half into our marriage, we were pregnant. And during that 19-week mark of pregnancy, during our very first sonogram, for very first ultrasound, it was with twins. Our prayers went from prayers of gratitude to, dear God, please help us with this parenting thing. I mean, after all, we were in our mid-20s. We were living in a one-bedroom apartment, and we had no clue about what it took to be a parent. But we were having twins, so we celebrated. However, that celebration was short-lived. Exactly 2 weeks after the news that we were having twins was given to us, that very next appointment, we were given the news that the twins were no longer alive. To this day, I can close my eyes and I can still hear the scream that my wife let out at that news. My very first conversation with God thereafter was just letting my heart cry out to him. There were no words. It was the very first loss that my wife and I had ever experienced in our life. And our prayers went from prayers of gratitude, asking his help for parenting, to, God, please, give us the strength to get through the pain. It was also the first real lesson in our life that we're not in control. That no matter how much we may plan our life, map out our life, God might have a different plan. Now, in the same way that a parent never wants to see their child remain in suffering or be in pain, God found ways to console us. 2 weeks after losing the twins, God found me a better paying job. And then, in ways that we cannot explain, even to this day, shortly after losing the twins, we moved into our very first home. And the funny thing about that is, we weren't even in the market for a home. We were not even looking because we had just lost the twins. Our prayers went back to prayers of gratitude because all of these blessings came during a very dark moment in our lives. Fast forward a couple months later, and we were pregnant again, but we were reminded once again that we're not in control. I was diagnosed with an enlarged heart, a particular heart disease known as idiopathic cardiomyopathy. And so, on August 31st, 2008, I was placed on the heart transplant list. However, only 6 days later, on September 5th, I received a heart transplant. 6 days is all I waited. And anytime I need a happy place to go to, I go to that moment in my life. As you can see, one tragedy was followed by an even greater blessing. Now, the next couple of years, it was a huge roller coaster ride. After getting through that first year, which was really tough as a heart transplantee, life seemed to be settling into at least some sort of normal. By now, my wife and I, we had 2 beautiful children, and health-wise, I thought everything was moving in the right direction. But God had a different plan. In early 2014, the doctors informed me that my kidneys were now failing due to the anti-rejection meds that were necessary to take for the heart transplant. By late 2015, I began kidney dialysis, and the search for a living donor began. My prayers, as with any other valley floor moment in my life, my prayers was just letting God know that I cannot wait to see what you have in store for me. Now, remember the one that I ended up marrying? Well, as God's will would have it, the one, my wife, ended up being my kidney match. And so, on October 19, 2016, my wife lovingly and graciously gave me her kidney. Here we are today, over 10 months later, and a conversation with God never goes without me thanking him that I get to carry a part of my wife with me wherever I go. Yes, you may say that I have a lot of conversations with God, and if it were anybody else, it might be considered as annoying. But this is God we're talking about. His capacity to listen is endless, and his willingness to help is eternal. You know, the funny thing about conversations is they define relationships, but it also strengthens them when and if you speak from the heart. So all the married couples here, imagine if you only spoke to your spouse once a week or only when you needed something. How strong, how healthy do you think that relationship would be? How often do we speak with God? You know, I've had my fair share of challenges in life, and with every challenge that I got through, there was an even greater blessing waiting for me to experience. You know, there have been those low moments that I experienced in life that kind of left me confused as to what I should do, the next move I should take. And it's no coincidence that in those situations, I found the path that I needed to take during the preaching of the words of God during a worship service. But there was also those moments of happiness to celebrate, both big and small, that I needed to have a conversation with God. My point is, a conversation, a prayer, happens when everything happens in life. Good or bad, I come to God to ask him, may your will continue to live in my life. Even on the bad days, it's all about letting God know that I trust you. I want God to know me. I want God to be able to read my heart. And there's no better way to get to know someone than with a conversation. I have come a long way with my conversations with God. I still pray for food, but only when food's in front of me. You know, it's pure comfort to know that a conversation with God can take place anytime and anywhere. He'll always be awake. He'll always be attentive. And what's so awesome about God is he knows exactly what's going to make us feel better even before we speak our first words. So I invite you all, take the time to let God get to know you, show him your heart, spend some time in speaking with him, and be ready for his reply. Thank you, and God bless.